cards right. Come on and get your game on.
Okay, so recently I watched these two really good videos by these two very talented people about why they love Yu-Gi-Oh! GX so much. I had only one problem though. They pretty much exclusively talked about the sub versions, little more than a passing acknowledgement or outright dismissal of the dub. And hey, that's fine, everyone's got their own preferences for this stuff, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't kind of bum me out. After all, I love the dub, and people rarely ever want to look at it and see any sort of value in it. But I think GX's dub has a lot going for it that the sub just simply doesn't sometimes. And seeing as though I'm kind of the resident GX maniac of the community, I figure I should tell everyone why I love this series so much. Now, with introductions out of the way, I was going to originally make this a lot more scripted, but I decided that off the cuff was a lot better for my feelings, because I have so many feelings on GX, it's really hard to condense it down into so few words. So I'm just going to ramble off with some notes. I think the first noteworthy thing about GX is that it is such a lighter show than the rest of the series. It is a show, especially more so in the dub, that is so fun and lighthearted and filled with this sense of charm and levity that is really unrecreated by a lot of the rest of the franchise. I think the closest it might get is like some early Arc 5 / early Zexal, but early to mid GX has this certain high school charm where you know these are kids, they're allowed to act like kids, they're in a common teenage child environment, which is a high school. It's a boarding school, but you know, it's basically structured similar to a high school. There's so much going on there. There's just so much fun to be had with GX. GX is just this ongoing story that's constantly evolving, because I assume there must have been writing shifts because the storyline changes quite a lot. I think it's impressive what foreshadowing they do get away with, given everything, but I would say the ongoing plot is not something that's all that appealing to me as a GX fan. The thing that I always found so appealing about GX is stuff like the fun little fillers, the characters, the dumb little comedic moments, which I feel like a lot of fans of the sub just don't like when it comes to the dub half of it. And to be fair, I do think the dub can definitely undermine stuff that's supposed to be more serious moments in the sub. But at the same time, if GX is supposed to be the lighthearted Yu-Gi-Oh! I think that's okay in a lot of cases. I think the comedy is far superior in the dub. The sub has the occasional joke, but not more so than any average Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, and they're funny when they pop up most of the time. Honestly, there's just something so genuinely laugh-worthy of the dub version. Whenever I watch the dub, I'm laughing so much at so many scenes. There's so many dumb little bits that the writers and the sound producers slipped in there to make people laugh, and you really get the sense with the dub that the people made it with and had a lot of fun doing so. When I said before about the fillers, I honestly think that the fillers, like I said, are one of my favorite parts of GX, mostly just because they are some of the most unique situations and duels, and the dub especially goes out of its way to make them so memorable. One of my favorite episodes in the whole show is episodes 18 and 19, which is the duel with Dimitri, the copycat duelist. I don't remember his name in the sub, honestly. He's not a main character, so I don't remember his sub name. Dimitri in the sub actually kind of disappoints me, because as someone who grew up with the dub first, obviously my expectations are going to be a little bit colored by that version. But I remember the super fun episode I watched as a kid where the guy is imitating Yugi and they played music from the original show and they hammed it up super hard and talked about the heart of the cards and Battle City, and like they played all the score from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! And he does an awful Dan Green impression, and it's so much fun. And then you watch the Japanese version and it's just a kid who's a net decker playing a really straight-laced duel, and there's only one passing joke that he might be getting a little too into character with Yugi. But at no point in the duel does he think he's Yugi, does he pretend to be Yugi. I think that's so lame. They don't even play any music from the Duel Monsters anime in the sub. And to be fair, the Duel Monsters anime didn't have that much great music aside from Passionate Duelist, but like, they didn't even do that. I mean, I know they used it for the Season 4 duel, but like, come on, like, that would have been such a great opportunity. And I feel like the dub capitalizes on moments like that so much more. But I also think an important thing to note, when a lot of people compare the two, again, I think the story, from the most part, from what I have gleaned, is more or less unchanged, aside from like a few small negligible details. Like, for instance, when Chaz duels Jaden in the school duel, in the Japanese version, Menjome is ignoring Jaden, or Judai, for most of it. And there's a plot point about that in the sub, where over the course of the duel, Judai goes from kind of respecting Chaz to feeling sorry for Chaz, or Menjome, I'm sorry, I'm gonna end up referring to the dub name so much. But in the dub, that happens pretty much right before the whole thing happens, as Jaden even says, I wish there was a way we could both get what we want. Because he doesn't want to, you know, have Chaz be on this self-destructive path, but he also isn't gonna just throw a match. And, you know, the message from the Japanese version is there, and it's conveyed in a slightly different way. And that stuff is the most fascinating to me, because it's so interesting when I watched the early parts of the sub, because I had only ever seen Season 4 for the longest time, and watching parts of the sub and seeing where it differentiated was so fascinating to me, because I've been so used to the version I grew up with for so long. And there are parts of the sub I actually genuinely like better. I think Hayato is much better than Chumley, for instance. Chumley is kind of a boring, lame, one-note character, but Hayato has depth. He's very interesting and driven and impassioned. He's just kind of quiet and a little bit soft-spoken about it. He's not sure how to really stand up and make his voice heard. And it's even shown he has some learning disabilities. And I think that's fascinating. That he's not dumb, he just struggles with certain aspects of school. And that's a really good message to have in a show like this. And I kind of wish the dub might have done that, but at the same time, it's not like that character really ended up going anywhere anyway. But that does make his whole journey much more satisfying. Unfortunately, a character I don't think was as well off in the sub is Syrus Truesdale, aka Marufuji Sho. I feel like they both get where they need to be eventually, and they still follow the same storyline, obviously. But I find Syrus to be a likable character at the start, who I want to root for, and Sho just kind of comes off as a pathetic creep, and I find it a lot harder to sympathize with Sho, because he does do creepy shit, like attach himself to Jaden, project all this stuff onto Judai, project all this stuff onto him, and all that, and it's just, and like perv on every female monster card he sees, and it's just so wince-inducing sometimes. And in the dub, Syrus is still kind of pathetic, but it's in a more endearing way, in my opinion. Like, I don't look at him and I go, oh, that's sad. I go, oh, I feel bad for him. But in the sub, I'm just like, no, oh, that's sad and pathetic and ugh, oof. Like, Sho is a big oof and Syrus is a big aw, you know? And that actually leads me into another issue, is I feel like the sub's emotional tone is off sometimes. The first duel between Syrus and Jaden in the dub is played pretty much as any other one is, and they have the regular music, everything's kind of fast-paced and exciting, and they're like, Jaden's seeing it as this like fun contest where he gets to test his strength against his pal, and the music on his half reflects that. And then you cut to Syrus, who's feeling weak and pathetic and lacking in confidence, and the music kind of goes into their lower key, maybe just a little like, you know, like wah wah kind of thing. And in the sub, this whole duel's going on, and Jaden's really kind of into it, and it's just this weird, off-putting, creepy music in the background, and it made it so uncomfortable to watch, because it emphasized how fucking pathetic Syrus is, or Sho. And I get that that's the point, but there comes a time where it's a time and a place for this, and Sho is, at this point, shown to be so pathetic he's unlikable. Sho is just so self-defeating. He's not fun to root for. And this is also just an aside thing. I don't really like Misawa as much as I like Bastion Misawa. Maybe it's just because I think his dub performance by Eric Stewart is really fun. The British accent and the kind of hoity-toityness about him is just so endearing. And I kind of like that more than this sort of solely straight-laced thing that the sub goes for. And I get that's more because if it's a Japanese culture thing, and over here in the West, you know, we're more likely to associate that type with like a kind of Britty high society man. But, you know, it's just a preference. I actually think Asuka is much better than Alexis. A weird thing about Alexis in early GX is just how fucking mean she was to everyone. And I always felt like, why are you hanging around these people if you're such an asshole to them? But in the sub, she's shown to be a lot more considerate of people. She shows a lot more respect to people, and I like that a lot more. I actually like Asuka more than I like Alexis by a long shot. To I guess address the elephant in the room. Jaden Yuki / Yuki Judai, they are the biggest character comparison, obviously being the main character. I'm not going to comment much on the stuff like Aster or Zane, because I feel like they're mostly the same throughout both versions. They feel fairly consistent, but Jaden feels like one of the most subtle differences, whereas Judai is the sort of snarky go-getter attitude type. Jaden is this idiot savant who has kind of somehow managed to earn a +1 with the universe, and everything kind of falls into his lap perfectly because he's just this laid-back, chill guy. And they're both fascinating to me because Japanese Judai is all about what he considers, you know, the way of the duel and all this stuff. He sees it as this thing of honor and respect, whereas as Dub Jaden sees it as a purely this is for fun thing. Sub Jaden is a lot quicker to realize the stakes in something and take stuff seriously, whereas Dub Jaden is very much more, he recognizes the danger, but he wants to still hold that piece of levity. It feels like the kind of like Spider-Man thing where he's joking to kind of distract himself and others from the danger. But despite that, he still shows genuine concern. When he duels Night Shroud / Darkness, Jaden is still like visibly upset by their situation, but he's still trying to remain hopeful and himself. And I kind of read into that as a sort of he's trying to like cope with it. And that's fascinating to me where they differ, because they both take it seriously, but Jaden is a little bit different from Judai in that respect. And in like my example before about how Jaden and Judai both handle their respective version of their rival, and that was always that was so interesting to me when I was watching. And that's also sort of where I have to address the tone shift, and this is my personal opinion, but I hate Season 3 of GX. I think Season 3 of GX is incredibly boring. I think it's too slow-paced, and I think it can be incredibly off-putting and depressing. And in a way, that's the point. And as set up for Season 4, it works, but it's still a really jarring tonal shift going from Season 2 to 3, in my opinion. And in the dub, I still think this tone shift is evident even with the lighter tone, and in a way, I think the dub kind of enhances the sub of Season 4 a little for me. Because going from the sub to the sub isn't as lighthearted as the dub is. It takes itself more seriously on average, and its idea of levity is more like, here's a breather episode where we have a filler duel, and not like, here's a wacky, goofy, whatever the fuck. I feel like the transition from Jaden going from this happy-go-lucky kid to this really depressed motherfucker is a lot more evident if you've watched the dub, because then it feels like, wow, this really did change him. He's like a completely different person. And I feel that more when I watch the dub. And you could say that's, you know, a fault, but I think that enhances the experience because it really drives home the point that Jaden has changed, and he is a different person now, and that he just has to live with this and learn how to be himself again. And I so wish that season got dubbed, because Season 4 is so fantastic. I think Season 4 is brilliant, and I'm just so upset it never got dubbed, because it could have been so good, but oh well. I have to live with what I have. Last thing I'll say in terms of comparison is I really love watching the sub after the dub, because you get so much clarification for the original meaning of stuff. There's some moments in Sub GX, or Dub GX rather, where you look at it and you're like, that was clearly something else. And those are interesting moments to go back and see in the sub, but I think the more interesting ones are the subtle ones I never would have noticed. Like I said before, like the Chaz versus Jaden thing, to me, the fact that it was slightly different in the sub was mind-boggling to me, because I felt like everything kind of worked so well in the dub that I was like, oh wow, that was slightly different? I didn't know that. One thing else I'll say, I love the characters and I love the cast. I think GX is one of 4Kids' best dubbing casts because the range they pull out. Sean Schimmel alone does so much legwork into making this fun. Crowler has to be one of the best fucking performances the man has ever given, and he is hilarious. Crowler is so goddamn funny in the dub. He's fine in the sub, but oh my god, is Crowler fucking hilarious. That man is a goddamn clown in the best way. It's also great when you see him go through his character arc when he duels Camula and he turns to his students and he even says, specifically in the dub, he addresses Jaden, he says, oh, Jaden, avenge me, my boy. And you see that respect he has for Jaden deep down. And that moment always hit me so hard as a kid, and that was the moment where I started respecting Crowler as a duelist. And then later in Season 4, when you see him duel Jaden again, and oh, that whole thing was fantastic. Crowler ended up being such a good character in the end, and I really appreciated his journey. And I wish more of the GX characters got to do stuff also, because it does sort of just become the Jaden show. And then when Aster comes along, as much as I love Aster, it sort of became also the Aster show for a hot minute. Then they just sort of left him for most of the season. I feel like they should have utilized the characters more. Zane should have gotten more stuff after he left. I feel like he didn't get enough. Again, Syrus has a pretty good arc throughout the show. I think Hasselberry, as much as I like Hasselberry doesn't really do anything. And honestly, of course, you know, poor Bastion. We all know what happened to poor Bastion. Some are better than others. Chaz, I don't even know what I have to say about Chaz, because I think everyone loves Chaz. The Chaz. Everyone loves that motherfucker, myself included. Is there anything I can say about Chaz that hasn't already been said? He really channels that Kaiba energy so well. He's such a dick, and you love to hate him, but you also love him. Like, you know he's such an asshole, but when he talks himself up, he's so charismatic about it, you can't help but fucking play along and Chaz it up. I love him. He's so much fun. Actually, a character I really wish got to do more was Blair. I kind of liked Blair at the end of Season 2. The like Brooklyn girl spark, and I don't know. You don't really get a lot of female characters like that in Yu-Gi-Oh! And you know, they're usually so girly, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when that's your only character trait for so many of your female characters is the girl, it was so disappointing to me that they sort of turned Blair into that, and I was like, come on, you had something unique. They don't all have to be the, like, Goo Goo Eyes, the protagonist girl. I hate that so much with Yu-Gi-Oh! Can't stand it. But I also just think so many of the archetypes in GX were so filled with creative potential. So many of the cards were interesting and cool. So many of the designs were just awesome and metal as fuck. And it was so creative with experimentation and trying all these different things and doing all this stuff. And I realized so much of what I like about Yu-Gi-Oh! Came from GX. Like, yes, Duel Monsters started the whole thing, but I think GX is what solidified me as a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan. I mean, I've based my entire channel's identity off of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I own, like, so much stupid Yu-Gi-Oh! GX related stuff. I've sunk a lot of fucking stupid amounts of money into Yu-Gi-Oh! GX stuff. And honestly, I love those characters. I love those seasons, that world. Duel Academy feels like such a real place in my mind. It feels like, you know, Jaden and the rest of them are these old friends, you know, in the same way that you can feel like that about any show you grew up with. It feels like every time you go back to it, you're revisiting, you know, old friends and reliving these experiences. And I think to GX now, and I think of the friends I've made over the years, and I can draw comparisons and think about that time in my life where I wasn't super sure of where I was going, and just I had the whole world in front of me. And all I wanted to do was play Yu-Gi-Oh! With my friends. And that's very special, and GX has that spirit of an energetic kid who just loves playing Duel Monsters so much. A kid that could just hang out with the crew in the schoolyard find a trouble, and never looking too hard. And that kid who was just super passionate and loved the game and what he was doing so much that he saved the world with it. GX kind of taught me that no matter what happens, you should always look to the future and never lose sight of having fun. And never let yourself fall into like a pit of despair, and to always find hope. And I think that's a strong thing for GX, is to never give up your dreams and your youth, and always hold on to that. And no matter what, never forget to enjoy yourself. And I feel like that's who Jaden is as a character. And I appreciate that so much about GX. And GX has impacted my life in a very meaningful way. Honestly, at times where I am feeling stressed or downtrodden or upset, often I can just put on an episode of GX and it will transport me to this happy mindset that nothing else does. Just this idea of sitting there and just playing a card game. Because that's one of the strongest things about GX, is that infinite potential ahead of you. Now, this went on so long, but I just want to thank everyone for watching and listening to me talk on about this. This isn't obviously meant to be some big analysis, but it's me just kind of talking about why I love GX so much, because obviously, I am obviously a big fan. GX obviously means a lot to me, and it's a thing that will always be with me. And it's a thing that colors my perception of Yu-Gi-Oh! Even today. So, it's important for me to talk about why I love it so much. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to why I love GX so much. And I hope if you haven't seen GX, you give it a try. I hope you all have a great day, and even better tomorrow. Always keep up the chase, keep holding on, and always get your game on.